so this is genuinely, it's one of the reasons I've been hesitant on the Atlas is a lot of times on the trails you see people struggling with the Atlas. And from everything I'm seeing, that's completely user error.
Well, what if we change positions? Why don't we put you over here and me film you doing it? Do you think you can do that?
I can try.
All right, let's try.
What's up, Brite Nation?
Hey, what's going on, Brite Nation?
So now that we've gotten some off-roading out of our system and we've taken a little bit of a break, it is back to work for us.
Yeah, we still have a lot to do to get ready for King of the Hammers 2021.
Yep, and today we actually have a pretty cool, informative video for you guys because today we are at Advanced Adapters to get our Atlas transfer case rebuilt. So they've got a bunch of dogs here that Jelly can play with while we film. And look at her. She's pining at the door right now. Look at it. They're like, come on, let's be friends. And she,
Go play. Go play with the other
dogs. Go play with the other dogs, Jelly. You're fine. We're right here. She's so needy.
Okay guys, so before we get into the race car stuff, the aftermarket side of the transfer cases, we're going to start with the Jeep, the JL, and a stock transfer case. Now, to go over this and actually explain this correctly so I don't give you guys any bad information, we've got Steve here, this little guy.
Hi, Steve.
With Advanced Adapters. We've got this little guy right here. So he is the know-it-all here, I guess, right? I don't know what.
I know what it does.
You know what it does? So the reason they have a Jeep up here and a stock Jeep transfer case right here is because they are actually working on an Atlas for the JL, which I've been...
Coming soon?
Coming soon. We're getting close. This is the actual transfer case from the JL behind me. We have had Atlas in there. We're working on finishing up shifters. All the mounting and all the adaptation stuff is done. So we're getting close. You know, spring, summer, you're going to be able to have a Atlas in your JL.
Let's get into your transfer case. So guys, if you don't know exactly what a transfer case does, how it works, we're going to sort of get into that right now. This is what gives you your two-wheel drive, your 4-high, and your 4-low by ways of gears and chains and...
yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, yeah.
Here's what we got, a quick demonstration of what we have. You know, it'll be kind of hard to see in the video, but this is where the transmission output shaft would turn when it's hooked up to the transmission and things are turning. Right now we have this case set up in two-wheel drive high range. So when the transmission shaft turns, the rear drive shaft turns, the front drive shaft does not turn.
So you can demonstrate
So
that.
I'll hold this.
And see, I can turn this way. This shaft is turning, this shaft is turning. It's all one-to-one. It's direct movement. Now, when we're on the trail and, all right, we need four-wheel drive.
So there's your 4-high.
Now
4-wheel drive high range. This still turns, but if you notice, these are now locked together. You can't
turn one without the other.
So it's making the front drives turn. Now, also on your stock application, these also have a neutral position for, you know, we have guys out there that tow their Jeeps behind the RVs. Now, everything is free. Nothing's connected. You can tow it down the road, or you just need to be in neutral for some apparent reason. Yeah. From there, then your next position is what they call 4-low. Shift. There we go.
Now 4-low is what gives you your gear reduction.
Yes. Right. So you're going to go slower in low range. So now, if we demonstrate here, you'll see how fast this shaft turns compared to how fast the front. This is a Rubicon transfer case or a Rock Truck transfer case. It's a 4-to-1 reduction. So every 4 turns of this turns the drive shafts 1 time.
Film both of those, ready?
So that is essentially what a gear reduction looks like.
Versus...
there's your 4-high.
That turns the same speed.
So that's 1-to-1.
There's your 1-to-1. So if you've ever wondered not just what a transfer case is, but how exactly it works, there you go.
Simple version, but in here you have gears on each side and then there's a chain running around it, and then when you're shifting, it's shifting that over.
Yes.
It's shifting.
Almost,
Like a bicycle.
chain.
Yeah, it's just like a 10-speed bicycle. You know, you pedal faster, but you don't go anywhere, but you can go up the hill.
Yeah.
That's your 4 low.
That's your 4 low. It's the easiest way of putting it. So this is accomplished by what they call a planetary reduction, which we'll start with showing you right here. Inside of here is, this shaft here. As it turns, it's hooked to these gears. This slides inside of a ring gear. So as this turns, this will turn this at a slower speed, and this would then be hooked to the rear drive shaft, and then also the chain connecting to the front. That's how all of that gear reduction takes place in
That's called a planetary gear.
planetary gear reduction.
Okay, so that shows you a quick demonstration of what's in the JL, but we want to kind of go over why they're working on an Atlas for the JL and what the benefits are going that route. Now, how did the Atlas come about? Like, I mean, was there...
In general, well, we've been adapting transmission and transfer cases forever. You know, we used to sand drag here at Advanced Adapters. We've done all kinds of fun stuff. But in 1987, Jeep went to these lighter weight aluminum transfer cases. They had small change. These are much bigger than what they were when, let's say, the 1987 YJ came out. Jeep used to have what they called a Dana 300, which we have right here, which is a cast iron gear driven case.
So you can see the difference, not just in size, but also in material. So this is cast iron.
Yes, this is cast iron. Also, when you go to this planetary style gear reduction, it makes these things a lot longer because you have to have a reduction unit and a drive unit behind. A Dana 300, when we're working on like a CJ5 or something that's really, really short, you need all the rear drive shaft you can get, so it's more compact.
Now, but they stopped making these in 87, correct?
They stopped making these in 1986.
86, okay.
Yeah, and then the aftermarket, everybody grabbed these out of the junkyards when the Jeeps were done. They put them in their rock crawlers. Well, then it came, hey, we need more low range reduction. We can't find them as much anymore. So we actually went out and made the first Atlas with a glorified Dana 300. It was an aluminum case instead of cast iron, which made it a little lighter. Instead of a 2.6 reduction, it was a 3.5 reduction in the beginning. We added synchronizers so they could be shifted on the fly, where these old gear-driven cases, you had to stop to shift them. They were hard to shift.
So that's one of the things. So these Dana 300s, these were all gear-driven, not chain-driven with planetary, and they were super strong. But if you wanted to go from 2 high to 4 high or 4 high back to 2 high, you had to come to a complete stop, where we know now with our new Jeeps that we can go into 4 high up to like 65 miles an hour, I think,
Correct.
maybe 63 miles an hour in the manual, but that's on the fly.
Now, moving on, it has moved on over the years to now, this is your standard Atlas transfer case configuration.
Which is still actually not much bigger than the Dana 300 and still kind of smaller and more compact
Yeah,
than
if we put like the link,
factory.
you look at the links together, you can see that it's still not near as long.
Where that planetary
Is up here.
still takes so much space up.
Yes.
So this uses a planetary gear reduction and a chain, essentially.
Correct.
The Atlas transfer case does not, though.
No, it does not. It is all gear reduction. You take a look, you have cast iron shift forks and gears as you turn the shafts. Again, I'll see if I'll turn this one from the back side. You can see the speed. And then if we shift it, then you can see as it shifts, this is turning. This is not a really low reduction, but we can go to high range. You can see they turn the same speed. The front drive shaft's still not turning because we have independent controls of the axles front and rear. We're just working on the rear axle.
So what he just said right now is exactly why I was waiting for you to say something.
Yeah.
So what he just said right now is exactly why I want and why you want one of these in your Jeep.
So now I know a lot of you remember hearing Kevin talk about like a rear dig or a front dig several times when we've been off-roading on the trails, and how he wishes he had an Atlas transfer case to be able to do that. Well, that's what this right here is actually capable of doing, and Steve's going to help kind of demonstrate and explain how it works.
So as we go back to where we were before looking at the original transfer case, now we have a cutaway where we can actually look at what we've got going on here. So you now notice you have 2 levers. With it being a gear-driven case, you have 1 lever for the rear axle, high, neutral, low, 1 lever for the front axle, high, neutral, low. So when you're driving an Atlas down the road, this lever goes into high. When we come in, that moves this lever forward, connects to this gear that's connected to the shaft. 1-to-1, this turns the same as this. The gears turn, but they're not doing anything. They're just along for the ride. Now when you guys want 4-wheel drive in the high range, you merely pull this lever back.
And that's the front.
That slides this collar over, so it goes from here to here and across to here. And there's your four-wheel drive. Now we want to go, we have a neutral position, just like we did on the stock case. Now we go forward with this to low. Now the power comes in here, goes across this gear, and that's your gear reduction. You can really tell here how much faster the transmission shaft is turning than the rear output shaft.
But I want to show this real quick. You still have the front in neutral here.
Correct.
And you have the rear in low.
Right.
So basically what that means is your rear is spinning in low range while your front isn't moving, period. It's completely
Just
disconnected.
like two-wheel drive high range.
So this is something that lets you do what's called a rear dig, which means that in a position and you want the rear to slide over, but you don't want to slide the front end over at the same time, you can do something like this. Now on the other side of the spectrum, you can do the same in the exact opposite, where you have your rear in neutral, correct? And
Correct.
then your front in gear.
Correct. So you can put the front into high, into low, and we'll see, we're turning slow, but you cannot do this with a chain-driven case, but you can disengage now the rear axle to neutral and have just the front axle turning. This is the front dig that everybody talks about. The rear dig's kind of nice, but the front dig's where it's at, because you can steer the vehicle, apply the emergency brake, and actually get this thing to pivot or go around an obstacle and get yourself out of a jam.
You essentially have a front-wheel drive vehicle now.
Yeah.
Which is really funny.
You can set the rear park brake so it holds the rear in place, and then drive the front end over so you don't.
Or it's
fall
not
off the
uncommon. You'll hook a tire on a rock and it'll pivot you around the obstacle. And instead of doing a 4-point turn to get around the corner, just take the rear out and spin it around the corner.
Again, it's the front dig and the rear dig that Kevin's always talking about every time you hear him pining after an Atlas transfer case, which we're working on for the JL again.
So we're not here actually to rebuild our Ultra 4 case. We're actually here to throw one of these in the JL today. No.
He goes, no. They're close, very close.
Now, one other thing we want to bring up on the Atlas transfer case that is we touched on earlier was the synchronization or the shift on the fly feature that you did not have. If you pan in here, these cases have bronze synchronizers, just like you would have in a manual transmission. So that allows the shift on the fly routine. You know, on your stock transfer case, to go from low range to high range, you pretty much got to come to a stop. On an Atlas, you might be going 15, 20 mile an hour. You can put the front axle in neutral. If you're in low range, shift this all the way through to high, put the automatic back in gear and keep on going. You don't have to stop. Is that a nice feature when you come off the trail and you go to get on the highway?
You don't have to stop. You just keep going.
You can go from low to high, but not from high to low, right?
High to low, you got to remember this is like shifting a manual transmission. So shifting from low range to high range is like shifting from, let's say, first gear to fourth or fifth gear. It's going to go in very easy.
Yeah.
But if you tried to downshift from like fourth or fifth gear to first gear, it's going to take some time for stuff to get together.
So now this, obviously, we know we're making one for the JL, and we're working on more the shift linkage and how to route all that.
So it looks nice and a nice OEM finish inside the vehicle, not like somebody cut the floor up to put 2 big sticks through there.
So
hey, cut my floor if I put 2 big sticks in it.
We have a Sawzall and a plasma cutter. We can make it happen.
Let's do it.
Okay, we're getting ready to start our pre-tear down here. Just our visual inspection of what we've got going on. This application required a spacer in between the adapter and the transmission. We're also going to demonstrate this is too much silicone.
look at that.
Thin layer of silicone is all that is needed. It makes the guy that has to work on it very unhappy when he has to clean all this up.
It wasn't us, it wasn't us.
Now, before I was told what happened, the first thing I found is I'm just spinning the yokes and checking things. You won't be able to see it in the video, but this is, the rear bearings are ever so slightly used. You can feel a little play in it. It turns nice and smooth, no question there, but there's play in this yoke, which means we've got something going on in the tail housing. After a little more conversation, they go, oh yes, we broke a drive shaft and just put another housing on the back of this to replace the one that broke when the drive shaft failed.
Which worked, but you're saying
it's not the right way of doing it. As we get into teardown, we'll show you how this works, but there's opposed tapered bearings in here, and there's a shim that sets in play. We try to machine these fairly close, but there's going to be variances. With that known, there's probably not a problem with this case, but there is probably a problem that needs re-shimmed. But we'll find out as we tear down, and we'll move on from there.
That's what we're going to do now.
That's what we're going to do. Now, this is one of the first wear points that we look at. This is a wear point on an Atlas when they're in a race application. This is the pin that holds the idler gear here in the center of the case. And this pin supports this gear, and that's right through there. These bearings will ride on the shaft. But what we'll find in looking at this, we will start to see wear marks on this. So this is not too bad, but you can just barely get your fingernail to grab on to the lip there. That means it's starting to wear.
Okay.
So this will get replaced as we go on through. So now, as this idler gear is in the middle of the case, the support in between the case and this gear, there's thrust washers. What we'll notice when these things are used hard, you'll see we have one thrust washer here that's burnt, and definitely the other side's not too bad. But this one's definitely burnt, will need to be replaced. The reason for only one side being burned is if we look inside of here, these are a helical cut gear. So depending on what direction the case goes, it tries to push this gear either this direction or it tries to push it this direction when it's under load. So depending on whether you're driving forward or backwards, the thrust washers take the load on either side.
I will say, I sure am glad that you guys know how this goes back together.
I'm like, man, I hope they know how this goes back together, because they're just like...
Okay, so now while they're cleaning all of the components for our Atlas so we can figure out exactly what's wrong and get a better look at everything, we are actually going to go practice shifting an Atlas in this 97 Grand Cherokee, which belongs to Steve right here, aka it's a ZJ, and we're gonna have him show us how to do it properly.
Are we ready to learn how to shift an Atlas?
Yes.
All right. A lot of people struggle with shifting Atlases. If you have one, don't fear. There's a way to do it. There is a trick. It takes an acquired feel. So we're here in my personal Jeep today, which has a 3.8 Atlas in it, an automatic transmission. We're going to start off, if we come down here, right now we have the rear axle in high range, the front axle is in neutral, and we're going to drive along to show you how to shift through the different positions. Right now, we're going to take off just rolling, because an Atlas is synchronized, they shift better when they're moving, so we're just moving a few miles an hour. We just can pull the front into high range. So now we're in four-wheel drive, high range, just like normal. Now, you're going along and you want to go back. See, sometimes it's a little sticky. It doesn't want to come out of gear. But if you kind of bump the gas a little bit or whatever, nice gentle touch, we're back into two-wheel drive. Now, as we move along, all right, we want low range. So we are going about 3 or 4 miles an hour. I'll just put the automatic in neutral, take the shifter, shove it forward, 2 notches, rear wheel drive low range, the front axle still in neutral. So we want 4-wheel drive, so we'll go ahead and push the front end, and there we're in low range, front and rear. If we want to do a front dig, well, we just give it a little play with the gas a little bit, it'll come out. Now we're in just front wheel drive only, you can do a front dig. This is very simple to do driving in a straight line. Where we run into issues is when you need to do a front dig, vehicles are bound up, they don't want to come out of gear. You see guys pulling and yanking on shifters, and they're cussing because they can't get the thing to shift.
Because you're on an obstacle, everything's
you're on an obstacle, and
bound, yeah.
and you got an audience, so you know that makes it great too. So what we're doing, we're on asphalt out here, but what we're going to do here is we're just going to turn the vehicle to bind the drivetrain, just like you would be on an obstacle. Now, we want to do a front dig, and you grab a hold of this shifter, and I don't care how hard you pull on it, it will not come out of gear, no matter what you do. You should never have to be strongman to shift an Atlas. If it's not shifting, you're doing something wrong. But now, we're stuck. It's not gonna, none of these are gonna come out of gear. So what we're gonna do, it's a two-handed procedure. The key is you don't wanna pull, is steady pressure. So we're gonna put pressure, we're gonna try to pull the rear out of gear. So we'll take the automatic and we'll go from drive, we'll go to neutral, we'll let it go into reverse, and then we'll come back out. No, it didn't want to come out yet. We're still pulling on it, not hard. Usually when you're on an obstacle, your foot's on the brake. If you can let the vehicle move a little bit, it'll help. But you know, if you just go back and forth, See, now it went into reverse, and we give just a little bit of throttle, and if you see there, it just slid right out of gear as soon.
With no effort.
With no effort. I wasn't pulling hard on it at all. So now, this is what people don't really get on Atlases or really use it. They try to shift when you're not really going very fast. Well, we're in low range. This vehicle has a 3.8 Atlas in it, but we're just going to pull the front into neutral, so we're just in rear low. So, all right, let's say we come off the trail, so we'll go ahead and accelerate up here a little bit, go through the gears, and we'll go up to, let's say, I don't know, we're going 20 mile an hour right now. All I'm going to do is let off the gas, put the automatic in neutral, grab the shifter, come out of gear, come in, just steady pressure, went right into high range. And we've now shifted from low to high range at 20 mile an hour.
So it's essentially, it almost is exactly like a clutch, just instead of like a manual transmission, just instead of using a clutch, you have putting it in neutral.
You have to put it in neutral.
And you're letting off the throttle because obviously you can't shift gears while you're on throttle.
Right.
Same concept. So this is genuinely, it's one of the reasons I've been hesitant on the Atlas is a lot of times on the trails you see people struggling with the Atlas. And from everything I'm seeing, that's completely user error.
Well, what if we change positions? Why don't we put you over here and me film you doing it? Do you think you can do that?
I can try.
All right, let's try.
Okay.
Are we ready to do this?
Yes. So clarify, I've never driven anything with an Atlas before in my life, so this is completely new to me. But
I don't film much, so.
This is new for both of us. It'll be fine. So, all right, so front's in neutral, rear is in high right now.
Yes.
So, and essentially anytime we're going into neutral, we don't have to put the gear shift into neutral. It's when we're shifting from high to low or vice versa that you want this to be in neutral.
Right. If you're going just a two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive, you can do it in gear.
Okay. So, but in this case, if I wanted to put this into high, I can literally just...
Yeah, we're just gonna touch the gas. There it is.
All right. It is like a manual transmission where you can actually, if you're just pulling pressure, if anyone's ever driven a manual and you're shifting without a clutch, where you just put just enough pressure and you'll feel where it can slot into place happily, if that makes sense. So real quick, does it matter if you're doing front or rear first?
So if you're going to change ranges, you'll always want to put the front into neutral, then you'll make your shift with the rear axle from high to low,
or vice versa.
Right.
Okay.
But always put the front in neutral first.
Okay. So neutral, super easy.
Just pull straight back.
Straight back. But once this is already in high,
doesn't matter. You can
technically I can put that back in gear and I can shift this into high once we're in gear. And same, oh wow, that was so easy. Biggest takeaway would be that if you're not able to shift with just your fingertips with barely any pressure, you're doing something wrong.
Welcome back. We're inside. We're getting ready to put this stuff back together. This is Moises. This is our head of our Atlas department. He's the one that, when I say I got to go ask somebody, this is who I got to go talk to.
That's the guy.
This is the guy. When you ask if it's going to ship on this date, this is the guy. So you send bribes to Moises and Advanced Adapters. So in our teardown, we found a few things. This case has been abused over the years, multiple different drivers. On this gear, if we look in here, we'll see how rounded off these clutch teeth are, where compared to, this is our new one up here, how they're nice and pointed and sharp at the edge. This is from improper shifting. The collar that will then slide over top of it, similar to this, has these same issues. All the points have been beaten off of it. This will cause the Atlas not to want to shift and not to go into gear as smooth. This thing's gonna be harder to shift. But to explain a little bit to you guys, as we said there'd be more about this when we came in, why you can't get an Atlas out of gear. So hopefully we can see on the camera. We're gonna look in here, and you will see a back taper to these where there's like a V cut into these. There's a matching V on these teeth. Same degree back taper. So when this collar slides on and those V's line up, it pulls this slider tighter to the gear so it can't pop out of gear. You never hear of an Atlas really ever popping out of gear. Whenever you're wound up trying to do a dig, it's trying to pull itself in gear and you're trying to take it out of gear. That's why it won't come, and no amount of force is going to overcome that.
So essentially, the more on throttle you are, the tighter it's intentionally binding yourself up. So you're never going to accidentally just pop out of gear.
Correct.
But that's why you kind of have to rock it, is to find that sweet
spot so it comes out of that torque lock and comes out of gear.
Okay.
Now, we also found another problem. These rails, there's interlocks here and there's pills. You can see that there's damage on these rails. This is from our interlocks to keep you from putting in high range and low range at the same time, and so on and so forth. Well, somebody decided they weren't going to try to pay attention to the locks we put in and literally overpowered the locks and damaged the rails. Then as that moves back and forth in the bore, it pulls off pieces of aluminum, goes through the case, goes through the bearings. We don't want that either.
Yeah.
But really, all in all, for 5 years of abuse, this has done well.
So that's about it. All we have left is to torque down the yokes and throw some oil in it, but we're not going to throw the oil in it until it's actually ready to go in. Now, we're going to use the heavy-duty shockproof for race applications, but if it's going in a normal street-driven application, you're just going to use some MT90 or 7090?
7590.
7590. So, other than that, we're going to torque it down, and that's it, man.
We'll be good to go. Now, I know that this was a super long video and a lot of information, but hopefully a lot of you guys were right there alongside us learning as well, because that was, at least for me, that was a massive learning curve, but super awesome. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Remember, you can find all your Lite Brite Nation merch at litebritstudios.com, all your Lite Brite Nation decals at pixeldecals.com. We love you so much, and we will see you next time. Bye! Blow kiss.